We just wrapped up a session on maximizing web presence here at the Adobe Government Assembly. We had a fabulous panel, so let's go and chat with some of them about their impressions of this panel. One of the panelists is expert Andrew Wilson, who talked about the initiatives that he is leading at the Department of Health and Human Services. Andrew, what did you think of this session? Were there any surprising questions or discussions?
It was really good. I mean, I actually learned a lot from the fellow panelists there. They did a really good job, and the projects they're working on are just tremendous. I mean, so it was great to see that, and really got good engagement, I think, from everybody in the audience.
What was one of the things that you would say to folks that weren't able to attend this session was the most poignant point that was brought up by either you or other panelists today?
Well, I think one of the things you really need to keep in mind is that social media, even in and of itself, has no value. It only has value in the ability to support your own mission.
Right. It is really interesting how this is web presence. There's other sessions today, breakouts on social media, on mobile, but it's all converging.
Sure.
It's all coming
Absolutely,
together.
they're all together, and you can't think of any of them in isolation. They all have to be connected together. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Sure, no problem.
I'm here with another one of the panelists from this web presence session here at the Adobe Government Assembly, Ronnie Levine. What did you think of today's session?
Well, the other panelists were very informative, and I was quite impressed with the turnout. I mean, standing room only. I think we turned a few people back because there was no place to sit or stand.
I think word was getting out this was the session to be at.
Yeah, this was the session to be at. I wonder who they came to see. You.
No, you.
No, but I was quite impressed. There's a lot of work, good work being done at the government. So, and the questions were very intense. They were paying attention.
Yeah. What was the most interesting question that you thought was asked of you or any of the other panelists?
Because I only remember the question that was asked to me. That was the most impressive question.
You had to answer that one.
Yeah, so that was pretty impressive. No, I think the person who asked me the question was, it was an intriguing question because he challenged me, are you using what you say you're using, and how fast is the adoption of that technology. So I thought that was good. I think people were really interested in how to take what they heard here today and use it at their facilities.
Interesting with web presence is you can really measure what's happening and know almost instantaneously how the public is reacting or within your agencies to everything. And I think people are going to remember the swagger wagon.
Yeah.
They don't remember anything else from this web presence session. They'll remember the swagger
wagon. And that's what I really wanted to get across is I wanted people, when they engage in technology, social media technology, is to make it memorable, to make it where people want to come. Sometimes you have to do business with the government. Just because you have to do business with the government doesn't mean it has to be onerous or tedious or difficult. It should be somewhat, as much as we possibly can make it, a pleasant experience. And as we proliferate social media agency to agency, people love working for the federal government. We do it because we have a general, a real sense of obligation. And we should bring that excitement to the technology we deploy to exchange information. So the swagger wagger, if you remember it, I've done my job. If you can emulate that inside the federal government. That spirit.
In developing web presence.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Here was Celine Delecki after our session on web presence. Thank you for sharing the efforts that the government printing office is making to make information more accessible online. What did you think about the session? Any surprises?
I think the session went really well. I mean, one of my favorite things when I'm invited to speak at one of these events is to hear everybody else and what they're doing and learn from them. I think the surprise is that there's really no surprises anymore in terms of people using the social media, people reaching out, people finding new ways to connect. I think that we've finally reached a spot where government gets it, and so now how do we go forward and use these channels to get our information out there and reach the people we need to reach, I think is the next challenge.
That's a really good point. I remember several years ago when I would speak about web presence, people were saying, well, people still phone, people still use in-person. Is it really realistic to imagine people are going to go online? Now that question is not being asked at all. This room was completely full of people that were interested in, okay, how do we do it better? there were questions and quite a bit of interest in the success of your project. The 2.0 version looks beautiful, by the way.
Thank you.
What are some recommendations for people who weren't able to attend this wonderful session? What are some of the recommendations you would give for people embarking on a project like yours?
Well, first off, I think what was really important is that the idea originated, first off, we had an idea, we've got data, people are interested in it, let's make it available. So we did take advantage of data.gov, we took advantage of the President's Open Government Initiative and thought of new ways to participate in that. And then we looked at what people were doing with the data, and we saw really good things and said, let's take these ideas that the citizens are generating and use them and bring them into what we're trying to do with our web presence and with our sites. And so I think a word of advice would be to pay attention, to listen, to look at what your citizens or what citizens are doing and what your information users are doing, and adopt your site and your communication channels to how they're using your data and how they want to be able to use your data going forward.
Thank you for your time. It's just amazing when you're talking about how it's been 150 years. You have information as old as 150 years. Just the progression of the GPO to now. So thank you for your time, Celine.
Thank you.
Stephen Webster, you help government agencies and other enterprises think about users in designing experiences for the web.
Yep.
What did you hear that was surprising or interesting from the other three panelists that were from government agencies?
I think an interesting observation for me today throughout all of the sessions is I think everyone realizes the citizen's important and everyone talks about great user experience, but if you listen to the language that lots of people use, they still use the language of their own agency. You know, this is what we did and this is, you know, the technology that we chose and these are the formats that we've. So I think we've solved the biggest part of the problem, which is recognizing the need for change and the need to change that thinking. And I think what we'll see in the months and years ahead is that actually becoming actionable as we start to bring not just technologists and analysts and experts into the process, but actually bring designers. I think what was great today was just to see that the one example that everybody was like, wow, that's a fantastic example, was the one where we'd engaged, or where the agency had engaged designers, and there's the answer right there.
Yeah, it's interesting, this evolution. I remember when HTML pages first came out, there were a lot of really ugly pages.
Because we all built them, yeah.
Because we all, you know, put up stuff. And that's evolved, right?
Yep.
It's improved. And now it's not just about presentation with HTML, but also rich experiences and interactions. How do you think, you know, people when they think about user design sometimes just think about things looking good. But today we heard a lot about web and engagement being behind the glass, as you like to put it, and how do you handle if 600 people give feedback. How does user design fit into that part of it? Not just the front piece, but the the handling of from the agency perspective.
That's a good question. I think you know, we often, when we introduce people to the ideas of design, we talk about big D and small D design, and we all think we know what small D design is. It's, you know, what texture, what color, what fabric, or what font, or how many pixels. Big D design is much more fundamental, and it's a school of thought as much as a discipline. And so that school of thought, not only does it not just apply to what's on the glass, look at the world around us. Is there any other building? Is there a vehicle? Is there any other product that wasn't created by somebody thinking about how do people use that product? And there's a reason there's a survival of the fittest with any vehicle or any product. The ones that people buy and the ones that people use most, they self-select as the ones that actually meet their needs. And so I think, you know, that kind of design thinking, quite frankly, the software industry is the last to catch up. It's the last to realize that technologists and business analysts don't have a right to decide on the final piece of the puzzle. What is that end experience? And when a designer thinks about that experience, they think holistically. You know, if it's an application form that you're having to fill in because you've just moved into a new area, they're following that bit of paper around. They're measuring how long it takes to go from one, you know, department to another department. You know, they're not just thinking about the design of the user interface. So I think, you know, the quick answer to your question would be recognize that designers are thinking holistically about the whole process, and they'll help us understand where a process change is the right thing to do, where a technology adoption is the right thing to do, or just changing the way we were thinking about the problem is the right thing to do.